Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Goodreads AMA special edition of Strange the World with our co-host, Mr. John Bruni.
Hi.
How you doing tonight?
Great. Yourself?
This is what happens, John Bruni. I buy these giant sweet teas from the gas station about 30 minutes before this show is supposed to start. And I start getting fucking hopped up on the fucking Go Juice before I set up the video and before I do the website update, before I send it out to social media. And somehow, every single time, I set the show up exactly the same way every time. I'm not a dummy. I know how to work, electronics. I know how to work these programs. This is like the, 10th or 11th show we've done for just this particular show. And every single time something goes wrong, either there's no audio, there's no video, the guest can't get in, I can't get the page to embed on my website. It's something different every time, and it seems like the solution is different every time. John, for this show, and I won't spend a lot of time complaining about the technology because it's free, and we're talking to each other from, we're only five and a half hours away, but we're talking to each other across the state in real time. It's being recorded and cataloged forever digitally on the internet. Who can complain about that? It's free, right?
Absolutely.
I'm complaining about it right now.
Welcome to the future.
It seems like the solution is always different. This time, for example, I set up the show, invited you, you came into the show, there's no, the show won't connect us because somehow I set the show up for tomorrow night at 7 o'clock.
Oh.
I did not click tomorrow night at 7 o'clock when I set the show up. The show is defaulted at right now, and somehow I changed it to tomorrow night, so I had to, so we're talking back and forth, we're texting each other, and I'm getting hopped up on the Go Juice, you understand? So the longer I'm sitting there trying to put it together, my hands start shaking, and I'm starting to get real frustrated because the Go Juice is taking over. And because if I wasn't on the Go Juice right now, I'd be like, hey, John. How's life? With the Go Juice, it looks like I have a little bit of spark in me, right? It looks like there's a little bit of something going on in this husk of this joke of a body. So the longer it takes to get the show set up, the more my mind just starts going, wah. Harder for me to concentrate. And then I finally get the show up, and here we go. We're going to hit the ground running. How you doing tonight, John Bruni?
I am doing fabulously well. I have my whiskey on hand, so
you got the Go Juice too.
Yes, except mine slows me down.
So, well, I don't know that I'm necessarily, just because I'm going straight doesn't mean that I'm not going to hit a wall. Have you ever read Alien, what is is it Deadliest of the Species, or it's Genocide? Alien Genocide, where the first scene in the comic book is a guy taking they've somehow turned the alien blood into steroids, and this runner injects himself with fucking alien blood and then fucking runs at full speed into a wall and explodes.
Wow.
You've never read that one?
No, never read that one.
Oh, it's great. Those are all great. The early 90s Dark Horse, Alien, Predator, Terminator, the whole 9 yards, all those are really good. There's a Batman versus Predator crossover that's really good.
That one I did read.
You did read that one? Right.
Yeah, that one I did.
I was into all of them. I was a huge Dark Horse fan. Dark Horse and Image were my... I didn't really read a lot of superhero books. I read the Dark Horse and the Image stuff. But anywho... I feel like I'm that guy about to take off and run straight into a wall and explode. That's what I'm trying to say, John Bruni. So what are we doing here? This is Strange the World, ladies and gentlemen. And in this show, I like to talk to fellow authors in the indie horror and bizarro genres. And we chit-chat about our careers and whatnot, and the philosophy of writing. This show is good for other authors to listen to while they... a lot of truckers that do the crystal meth and drive for 60 to 70 hours straight. They like to listen to these long-form interview shows when they can't be writing. They like to get all cranked out listen to these shows. So that's who this is for. No, this is for aspiring writers, and also our colleagues who are contemporary writers. This is for us to talk to each other, talk about each other, really discuss where we're at in the scene, the indie horror and indie bizarro scene today, and that's pretty much what we do. It's a long-form show. We usually go about 2 hours, and I like to get real in-depth into my guest's career and what motivates them to write and whatnot. And that's not what we're going to do today, is it, John Bruni?
No, it's not. We're going to do two things today. We're going to talk about Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks, which is my new release from Strangehouse. It just came out yesterday. And after we're done with that, we're going to have you answer those AMA questions from Goodreads. We have a whole stack of them right here.
Last month, Teresa Pollock, she christened me the inaugural Goodreads Bizarro Fiction Group Author of the Month, and so we got to read a couple books of mine. We got to read Stranger Danger, co-authored with the always game Danger Slater. Well, that would be that guy.
Amazing book.
And another one, Murder Stories for your Brain Piece, which is my newest collection of short fiction. Although I have written enough now to do a third collection. That might be coming out pretty soon. We'll see. But anyway, we got to do group reads of those two books, and that was awesome. We had some really good readers in there. Really communicated well through the whole process. And as a writer, John, you've stood on that void, that endless nothing. From the never-ending story, the nothing.
Oh, yes.
You stood on the precipice of the nothing, writing and just wondering, agonizing, like, is anybody even gonna fucking read this shit?
Oh, yeah.
And, we haven't pitched ourselves into the nothing yet, so those Goodreads group reads, oh man, it's great to go in there and watch everybody give their thoughts on particular scenes, particular characters. It's just great to watch them go through your book and give their thoughts and their predictions and their analysis afterwards. And I did my best to try to stay away unless I was asked a direct question. And I was really lucky. I didn't really get my balls broken at all. I don't know if they were just being nice, but I've seen those Goodreads group reads scare an author so bad they haven't released anything since.
Holy shit!
Not in the Goodreads, not in the Bizarro, because we're just now starting to do that. Last month was the very first month. This month they're doing the new Bizarro Author Series authors, Tom Lucas, Scott Cole, who were my two previous guests, and then Brian Auspice with his book Deep Blue, and he's apparently a fake person. Apparently he doesn't actually exist, so there's not really any way to communicate with him and get him on the show. So that's why we only did the two of the three. But they're the authors this month on Goodreads. So if you're not a member of that Goodreads Bizarro group, which we found out John Bruni, he wasn't a member of that group.
I could have sworn I was. I really could have sworn. I got emails and everything. I could have sworn.
He missed out on the whole thing.
Yeah. Fuck.
Anyway, so in addition to these reads, and like I said, I didn't get they didn't murder me in there. Like there's some vicious people in the horror side. Like if you're there's a bunch of different little splinter groups in the indie horror stuff on Goodreads, and they do group reads, and they don't expect the author to go in there. A lot of times they'll do somebody like Stephen King or Clive Barker or somebody like that. They're of course those people aren't going to show up. But these poor indie authors, when they're like in there the whole time reading every comment, and these people are eviscerating their book. Oh, it's hard to watch sometimes. And the author will get in there and try to defend himself. Like I prepared myself for that, but they were real nice to me. I don't know if it's because it's a new thing and they didn't realize that they could let the hammer drop if they wanted to. But they're encouraged to do that, gang. If you go in there, go to the Bizarro group, get involved in the group reads, and you don't have to be nice. You don't have to be nice at all. If you don't like the book, if you think it's a weak book, you fucking let them have it. But anyway, It was a real good experience for me. In addition to that, though, we got to also do an Ask Me Anything on there, and John Bruni has a big old stack of questions, not really that big at all, actually, to ask me. And I've done so many Bizarro community interviews that I think people pretty much know enough about me that that's like the law of diminishing returns. The next time I do an open forum, question and answer, nobody's going to say anything. The only question is going to be, how many more of these do you plan on doing, dude? But we're going to get into it, and we're going to try to give some creative and unique answers that I haven't, so that I won't be. I'm very bad at repeating myself, John Bruni. I'll be having a conversation with one of my poor friends, and I'll realize 10 minutes in that I've already told them this fucking story. And God bless my friends. They're always nice, and they always act like they don't know what I'm talking about.
I think I might have the same problem.
So, but before that, you got a new book.
Absolutely. Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks.
Now,
hot off the presses.
We had you on the show, and we did your whole biography and your life story as a writer.
Yeah.
When was that? Last summer?
It had to be.
And pretty much right around that time, I sold Strangehouse to Rooster Republic.
Mm-hmm.
Right as your book was about to come out, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so things got rearranged and restructured, and as Rooster Republic started to figure out how they were going to run the Strangehouse wing, which is now the horror, the extreme horror imprint of Rooster Republic, who is that part of the company is a Bizarro humor side, and then you've got the horror Bizarro side at the Strangehouse, and you are the second ever Strangehouse release through the Rooster Republic imprint. The first being Andre Duza.
That's right.
His book King Dollar.
King Dollar. Mm-hmm.
How has your experience been working with the new Strangehouse regime? Because I've talked to them, of course, but I have no say at all in their release schedule and how they do business. I have no idea what kind of devil contract they conned you into. I have no idea. Tell us about it.
No, it's been really good. Seamus and Erica have been really great. It's been fascinating to learn how everything works and comes together. I'm also editing for Strangehouse right now. I'm reading Slush Pile and approving things. And by the way, if you have submitted something to Strangehouse and you haven't heard back, rest assured we are going to get to you. It's just a long process. It's just the transition that's just so slow. I mean, Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks was supposed to be out, I think, in August, as the third part of that promotion that was going on at the time, and it's out now. So it's really slow going, but we want to make sure that we get everything right. We want to make sure that everything is just perfect for our fans, essentially. And yeah, it's really my favorite part, though, I have to say, is reading the submissions. There's a lot of good stuff out there, and a lot of those authors are submitting to us, and it's just a great pleasure to peek behind the curtain and see what's going on, So I think that's probably my favorite part.
Yeah, nobody likes me, so when I was running Strangehouse, it was almost like there's like a tier system of people will go through and submit to the very top, get rejected, come to a rung down, get rejected, go to a rung down, get rejected, and sort of go through this hierarchy of the Bizarro and horror community. And it seemed like Strangehouse under my management was relatively high up on that list, and I was always really proud that people would, because we were real picky, and I'm sure you guys are too still, real picky about what we took to make sure that it really represented the brand of Strangehouse, the dark kind of extreme horror side of Bizarro. And I think that's kind of that spirit is staying true over at the Rooster Republic. Now that Strangehouse is in the hands of Seamus and Erica, everybody loves those guys. So I could only imagine how much more revered the brand Strangehouse is now that an asshole like me, a fucking douchebag like me, isn't running it anymore. So I'm really excited for you guys to see just how far you can take the ball and run it down the field. Because even handicapped with my my wonderful personality, we were doing really well.
I gotta say though, the really funny thing is I've looked at a lot of the correspondence, so I had a good idea of what's going on. I've looked at it, and almost, I would say maybe 20 to 30% was actually you, and the rest of it was Sean. You know?
Yeah, Sean did a very very good job. He's just not he's not a vocal public person. So no matter how many times I said, this stuff is handled by Sean Ferrari, the editor of Strangehouse, I'm the asshole saying that. So
Right.
it's just that gets just like this dude. My face is on everything. It's my social media stuff that's going out. So people just never, and people still to this day will send me an email and say, when are you opening up submissions for Strangehouse? And I'm like, how many times do I have to put out there that I'm no longer involved in it? I understand that it's my name sort of attached to it, but it's a fucking fake name anyway, man. It's not even,
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of radio shows. If somebody calls into a radio show and they say something completely asinine, completely stupid and off the wall, the radio hosts are somehow blamed for it. It's like they suddenly said it,
Right. So the downside of that is Sean doesn't get the credit he deserves, but he is not out there asking for it. He's a very quiet dude. Even in person, even as a friend, he's a quiet guy. He used to I guess co-host this show. You watched all those episodes.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was co-hosting. He just kind of watched the show and had a webcam on him while he did it. God bless him. But he doesn't have a lot to say. Anyway, let alone like trying to like put himself out there as an editor or the behind-the-scenes guy at Strangehouse, but he really he spent a good solid year handling all those submissions, all the editing, everything, and he did a great job. I have zero. I can't think of one time when I was like, Sean, you're doing that wrong. And I've worked with a lot of idiots, so I've had to tell a lot of people, you're doing this wrong. Fucking why would you possibly do that? I never had to say that to Sean. So
he was one of the best editors I've ever worked with.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he doesn't want to do it anymore because he doesn't see it as a very lucrative experience. But it's just because he won't put himself out there. If he was more into social media and more into really having a louder voice in the community, he has everybody loves his editing. No complaints about it. And I actually tried to get him to go over to Rooster Republic, and he just didn't want to. Just didn't want to do it anymore. Just doesn't think it's it's not that. I don't know. I'm making it sound. I'm fucking burying the guy. I'm making it sound like he's he's money hungry or something. He is so good at it because it takes up so much of his time. He's meticulous, and he won't let an hour. He's not going to rush through a manuscript at the last minute. A lot of editors are guilty of waiting until the 11th hour to even get started and then rush through and leave these gaping holes in their editing. Sean would spend those extra hours to make sure that everything was perfect. He wouldn't let a manuscript out the door. There's some of the Strangehouse stuff that is meticulously edited, and every book has typos here and there, but you're not finding glaring crazy shit in quite a few of those Strangehouse books that were put out under his watch, and so it's just one of those things where he was like, well, I'm spending so much time, I can't even work a normal job and do this at the same time, so this has to pay me like a normal job, and he wasn't doing enough freelance work to balance it out, and he had to step away, unfortunately. And I think it's a big loss to our community because a lot of good to great books were handled by him, and there's nothing worse than getting a book that's just covered in poor grammar. It doesn't matter how cool your story is. If your writing is a piece of shit, the book is a piece of shit. It's just all there is to it. Doesn't mean it can't be fixed and re-released later. I've seen that happen a bunch of times where authors had to re-release their product because they didn't get the proper editing done to it. But anyway, that's that. What else? We talked about Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks on your appearance. What has changed, and what can we expect as readers out of your brand new book?
Actually, very little has changed. Sean, actually, maybe he's one of my favorite editors to work with because he told me that there was very little that needed changing. He said it was a very clean read, so there was very minimal editing involved.
Let's stay on that subject though for a minute. I'm sorry this is turning into the Sean Ferrari edited books show, but one of the things that Sean was had a very strong opinion of was not messing with the creative side of a book. And that's not to say that he ignored creative issues, continuity errors, or that he didn't pay attention to the flow and the rhythm of a book. It means that if he didn't already fall in love with the story, he rejected the book. He wouldn't accept books that needed super heavy creative editing, meaning this character should be a woman. This, the book doesn't need this third act. He wouldn't mess with that. If he felt that those issues were present, he would reject the book in the submission process. So the only stuff he edited, he wasn't just a copy editor. He would look for continuity issues, and he was often, with me especially, would bust my fucking balls if I said that a creature was 20 stories tall, and then the main character could jack him off with two hands. I'd get a text like I can't believe I'm talking about what dudes jack off, but I don't think that dude could, maybe instead of 200 stories, it should be 2 stories. So. It's not that he ignored stuff like that. It's that he felt very strongly that the creativity should remain with the author, and that the editor shouldn't have a heavy hand in shaping the story itself. And for better or worse, there are most of the editors that I know in this community in indie horror and bizarro take the exact opposite approach, and they will destroy you. They will destroy your spirit. They will destroy your love of writing because they will go through each and every sentence and tell you exactly why it's fucked up. And some people like that. Some people look for that in their editors. They look for people to destroy their stories. Fuck the third act. You need 6 more characters. This guy should die on page 20 instead of page 200. Who the fuck is this? It's like you wrote your own mom into this story so you could watch her get fucked.
Did you ever read Writer's Digest back in the day? Well, there used to be this guy who used to advertise in every issue. It was basically this mean-looking motherfucker, and he would just stare right into your soul from this ad, and he would say, "I will fire you." His whole thing was just tearing writers to pieces. In the name, of course, of making them better writers.
Of making them better writers, right. And that's and so some people as editors, like I said, I think most of the editors that exist, the freelance editors that you can buy work from in these communities are the drill sergeant type editors that just want to punch you in the baby. They just want to fucking... They want to destroy your soul, and if you're still standing when they're finished with you, then they welcome you into the community. Sean is not that guy. Sean is the guy behind the curtain that you never even see, and he accepts the cream of the crop, and then he makes sure that their manuscript is as near perfect as he can make it. Now, the thing about those drill sergeants, though, the reason that I don't particularly like using them, beyond the fact that I just I'm really sensitive and I don't like people telling me that my writing sucks, is they don't do a lot of the copy editing or grammatical issues. So you'll get you have a 200-page manuscript, you'll get 250 pages of red ink back, but it's none of it is actually fixing the mechanics of your grammar. So even if you make all the creative, even if you basically rewrite your book as though this guy wrote it with your name, you still need to buy a copy edit. or you need to cross your fingers and pray that the publisher that you end up with that has no money and too many releases on their table and not enough help and certainly making no money is going to love your manuscript enough to copy edit it. And it is what it is. I just really I appreciated what Sean did, that he took a different approach, and that I could rest comfortably at night knowing that when I put the brand logo on a book that Sean edited, that it was going to be very well handled editing-wise, copy editing-wise, and that the author or the reader could then really enjoy the experience error-free as much as humanly possible. That's all I have to say about that. What do you prefer? Do you prefer the drill sergeant to fuck you straight up your ass, or do you prefer the other side of the coin?
Generally I prefer the Sean type of editor, but at the same time I don't want somebody who's afraid to bring up, like you said, a continuity issue. If they see something that is really, really fucked up, they can maybe just mention it, don't go Arlie Ermy on me or anything like that, but just let me know about it. I do have a thick skin after all these years of having been in the industry, so I can probably take it, but be gentle.
Even to this day, I always use Sean as one of my pre-readers, and he always has notes for me in that regard. And I've gotten better at handling that, because here's the thing. Maybe I'm not done with editors. The editor that you want to use, is not the cheapest guy or the guy that's got a spot open tomorrow so that you can get your manuscript back as soon as possible. If you want to spend $1 and have your manuscript looked at overnight, nothing is going to fucking change. You have to either pony up a lot of money and get it done by tomorrow, or a mid amount of money and get it done a month or 2 months from now. But regardless, your attitude shouldn't be one of desperation. As a writer, you owe yourself and your work more than that. So what you need to do is be very picky and choosy about the editors that you work with. What you need to do when doing research, not just finding the first freelance editor that'll return your email or your Facebook message, you need to read work that's been edited by that individual.
Definitely.
Not necessarily written by that individual, but edited by that individual, so that you get a sense for the kind of material that editor enjoys editing.
Yes.
It's a dance. You have to, just because this guy says these are all things wrong with your book, it's all subjective. They're not going to, I'll even go so far as to say, when they try to point out, a lot of editors will immediately go to, that's a standard trope, it's been done to death, don't you dare write a book about, robots versus people. I'll argue that my book, part of Stranger Danger there, my novella Computer Face, is about as weird and original a take on robots versus humans as you're going to find. Why?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Why? Why? Because I took a trope, and then I tried to do all of the things. I tried to do something different than all of the robot versus human stories that I've read and watched in movies and read in comic books and read in other novels for my whole life, right?
Yeah.
So it's not the trope itself that's the problem. It's what you do with it. It's how you choose to approach those ideas. And a lot of times I will argue that the reader will be more comfortable with a standard done-to-death trope than they will some completely off-the-wall original idea that takes 20 minutes to explain.
Yeah.
I'm doing a book like that right now called Chainsaw Mantis. It's really difficult to explain exactly what it is, because I've never read a book where praying mantises take over the world and have political fights about mantis rights and about protecting males from the females biting their heads off during mating, and running for Congress in order to pass laws to prohibit this behavior. That's not what trope is that? That's not anything standard. So the way I choose to describe that is, what's your book about? It's about insects fucking. That's the best way I can handle it. But whenever I talk about Computer Face, it was really easy. It's robots versus people done Kevin Strange style, and that's being able to take a trope that an editor that doesn't like that particular type of story would just toss it out the window. Would just say, "Fuck you! Don't write. I'm not editing that, or don't write that." Or if you're pitching it to a publisher, like oh, rejected. It's about robots and people. How many times are we going to write about robots versus people? I argue that we're going to write about it at least one more time, and it's going to be interesting. So it's very important that you do your research on your editor, because just because the editor you pick doesn't like your story ideas doesn't mean they're bad story ideas. It means you may not be the best pick, the best, you may not meld with that particular editor, and you should seek another editor. You shouldn't throw your manuscript away and start over and try to please an editor that you don't meet eye to eye with.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
It's exactly like marketing your stories to publications. You got to know what markets you're submitting to. Chances are, if you're writing a hardcore horror story and you submit it to a magazine of fantasy and science fiction, they're probably not going to take it.
Yeah, when I read books about writing, the mechanics of writing, it's a pet peeve of mine that the author continue to go to their own work.
Yeah.
And use examples of their own work. And I've done that twice now, and I'm about to do it a third time. I apologize. I hate this too. I know you guys are like, oh, you're just trying to get us to buy your books. Sure, I'm so hopped up on Go Juice, I don't even know what my name is right now, so just forgive me. I just finished a story called Shuggath Steel for a Swords vs. Cthulhu anthology, right? But I'm 90% certain that it's going to be rejected because this publication doesn't seem super open-minded about excessive gore and excessive sex. And you're never going to find a story of mine that doesn't have at least one, and most of them have both, in just absolute excess. Because I like to write extreme fiction. I grew up, two of my huge loves when I was a teenager were Clive Barker and Poppy Z. Brite.
Nice. Great writers.
I just grew up on that, the idea of creating sensual violence and sensual death. You know what I mean? Mixing the carnality of sex and death together into really grandiose prose. So it's not in my nature to see a call for submissions like that and try to write for that publication. I have to write my own shit. And like you're saying, you can't write one way and expect a publication that isn't really open-minded about that style to accept your work. Like, I'm not gonna, when that rejection comes in, I'm gonna be like, yep, it's not. It has, I'm not gonna hold it against them at all, because I really wanted to write a fantasy, like barbarian style story with Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos elements. That was really appealing to me, and I started to get ideas immediately. But at the same time, I knew in the back of my mind as I was writing, this isn't going to be a good fit for this publication. So, like you just said, you're exactly right. You have to be mindful of where you go with your material, and that's for both publications, for collections and novels, to going straight to a publisher, or to do short fiction in magazines or websites, but also looking for an editor is important, and I think that's overlooked sometimes when people talk about where should I submit my material. I think a lot of times, which editor should I submit my material to, even if it's freelance work and I'm paying for it. I think that's sometimes overlooked about, you can't just go to a random Joe, because he'll end up having you rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until you've written his story story with your name on it, and you're probably not going to be happy with it, but you're going to think that it's written the correct way because the editor you just dropped 300 bones to told you it was. You have to make sure that that 300 bones is going to the right guy or girl that likes you guys like the same thing. Communicate with that person. Ask them, what have you edited? Which publications have you edited for? Which books have you edited? Which authors do you work with a lot? And if you start finding a common thread that you guys are both really into extreme sex and violence, you're probably not going to run into a lot of issues with your editor when you turn in a manuscript chock full of sex and violence, right?
Oh, absolutely. Although it's worth noting that the inverse of knowing your markets is also something to look out for, because you should never write a story for a specific publication or anthology, because if they reject it, where are you going to bring it, I spoke
about that with Scott Cole, and that's exactly right, and the opposite of what I've been doing for the first part of this year. I used to never write specifically for an anthology or specifically for a magazine because of that exact reason. What are you going to do with it when it gets rejected? Who else is going to put out something specifically like what you just wrote? Because the anthologies are always called something like this, really specific, a barbarian story with Cthulhu mythos elements. There's probably not going to be a lot of those calls for submissions in the next couple of years, right?
Yeah. Plus,
no, go ahead.
Plus, word does get around to other editors, and if you try to palm off one of these things that you wrote specifically for that anthology or whatever the case may be, they'll recognize it and they'll know, oh, that's what you're doing. And,
for sure, and that's not what they're looking for original stuff. And however, I found myself doing that lately as a challenge. I found myself using those calls for submissions almost like writing prompts, and I've been writing a lot of short fiction this year. That nothing that I've written specifically for a publication has been outright rejected yet, but a lot of it's still out there floating and hasn't been accepted either. So I'm going to end up with quite a few stories on my hands about halfway through this year that have no homes, that were written specifically for a market. And that's bad news for the stories, but for me, it was motivation. I was having trouble with short fiction. I was having trouble hitting word counts between 3,000 and 5,000 words, and I really challenged myself at the beginning part, late last year through now, to really write towards those word counts. And that's another thing that I advise people not to do. Don't write toward a word count. Write your story however long it's going to be, whether it's going to be 3,000 words, 10,000 words, or 100,000 words. Don't worry about what the word count is till you're done. But this is just sort of like training exercise. It's like I'm taking my barbarian sword out in the backyard, taking my shirt off, and swinging it around. I want to be able to, it's a goal of mine to be able to, in my head, before I even start my story, to know, okay, this is a 3,000 word limit. So think of a 3,000 word story. Think of a 5,000, a 7,500 word story. Think of a 12,000 word story. And being able to hit that. It's a very difficult thing to do, but you can do it with training. If you train yourself and you work hard to hit those, you'll start to understand the rhythm and the construction of your story. Right away, you know a 3,000 word story can't be 3 or 4 scenes long. It's going to have to introduce the characters and whatever conflict and resolution in about the same amount of time. Like the whole experience is going to have to take place in a very relatively short period of time. Otherwise, if it ends up being 3 or 4 scenes or over a long period of time, or multiple character perspectives, it's going to have to be it's going to look like an outline. You're not going to be able to fill in the colors and fill in the details and the highlights and the lowlights. You're just not going to have enough time. Yeah. So the more you do that, the more you say, like, okay, this has to be 3,000, and then you end up with a 3,000 word story. This has to be 7,500, and you end up with that. The more you do that, the more you're able to hit that, the more you understand the scope of that word limit. This is the story I can tell within the confines of that word limit, and that's what I've been practicing. And I'll end up with stories that don't have a home because of it, because of rejections, but I think I will gain the skill, or have honed my skill, of being able to pick a scope of a word count and hit it pretty closely after this, and that's I don't know why that's important to me. It just is, because I was having trouble with it, and I like to fill in. I like to, as a writer, I like to challenge myself, see where my weaknesses are, and try to practice and fill them in. So that's, for me, it's just been sort of, I've been honing my barbarian sword swinging skills this year.
It's also worth noting that I am breaking my own rule as well, for one story at least. I am writing one story for a particular anthology, but it's fun writing, so even if it gets rejected, at least I had the fun while I was writing it. So there's always that.
Tell us about that one.
I'm trying to get into M.P. Johnson's G.G. Allen anthology.
Yes.
And really, that's such a specific scope to aim down, So if it doesn't get in, then there's really no point in shopping it around anywhere else. But it's fun to write it anyway.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you can use that as writing prompts, and even if they don't go anywhere, at least you did it. You said, I want to write a G.G. Allen story now because everybody else is. To me, that's a good. When I say everybody else, I mean, like, you start seeing people that are going to be involved or pitching to that anthology. You start seeing what their ideas are, and it just becomes a fun thing. Like, I want to participate in that too. Isn't when is the submission cutoff date for that? Isn't it March 1st?
It might be the end of March. I'm not sure. One or the other. I'm not certain, but the story is going to be done on Friday. So
I've got one that I've been running around in my head about. G.G. Allen goes to the doctor because he can't shit, and G.G. Allen. Anybody who doesn't know, G.G. Allen was an infamous punk rocker. Died super early. He was probably the craziest human being to ever live. Just a train wreck of a human being. Loved to shit on stage and then throw it at his audience, and his audience beat the shit out of him, and he beat the shit out of his audience and himself, and he was an awful person, maybe the worst person ever. And M.P. Johnson, who is just one of the coolest fucking human beings I know, wants a G.G. Allen Bizarro anthology. So the weirdest, and G.G. doesn't have to be the main character. He can be, it just has to be themed, G.G. Allen themed Bizarro. So I had the idea of G.G. going to the doctor, complaining, and G.G. Allen isn't going to go to the doctor. That's one of the jokes of the thing in the beginning, in the first place, is this guy probably never saw a doctor in his entire life about anything. He wouldn't give a shit, except in the in the event that he can't shit on stage, and throw it and smear it on himself and eat it and throw it at his audience. So it's his, and it's extremely bizarro, and it goes to places that are ridiculous, and there's it just goes crazy once he shows up at the doctor's office. So I don't know if I'll get it written or not, though. I thought I was out of time because I ended up skipping it to do the Swords versus Cthulhu anthology story, and I'm also in the middle of writing one for Apex Publications, a hardcore sci-fi story for them. And the cool thing about a market like Apex is they don't have any guidelines other than make it science fiction, fucker. They give you we're open for science fiction. Here's the word limit, and you're pretty much good to go as far as that magazine is concerned. And it's a pro market. They pay 6 cents a word, up to 7,500 words, which means you're going to get a big payday off of that story if they accept it, and they don't accept much. So that's another challenge. Another challenge that I presented myself this year is to get accepted in a pro market and really get paid well for a short story. And that Swords versus Cthulhu is 5 cents a word. So I definitely fucked myself by including a lich princess with 3 tits, it's just very vulgar, and there's no way they're going to take it. But it's a pro market, and that's one of my. Anyway, I jumped ahead of the G.G. Allen stuff, and I thought I was out of time. But if I still have another month, I might go ahead and try to tackle that one.
I think it's the end of March. I'm pretty sure.
How long have we been talking, dude?
Almost an hour.
Oh, fuck.
Maybe we should get to those questions.
I don't know. I've just been fucking babbling because I'm on the fucking go juice so hard. What have you been up to, my friend? What have you been doing?
Mostly working, writing, the usual. Not a whole bunch of exciting things. I used to lead an exciting life. now I lead a home life. But that's all right. I get some writing done.
We got you into the Midwest Bizarro Writers of America for some reason. That's what I want to call it for some reason. Bizarro, what is it? Help me out here. The BWA, the Bizarro Writers Association, Midwest chapter.
Yeah.
We got you in there, buddy.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
We got a show next month, don't we?
Oh, yes, indeed we do.
I don't think it's been publicly announced, so I'm a fucking asshole for even mentioning it, but we're doing a new Bizarro Hour. Maybe. If we do, it's going to be next month, and it's going to be in Chicago. We did one, I believe it was January of, was it a year ago, or was it 2 years ago?
It might have been a year ago.
January 2014, I think, is when we did that, so a year ago. So a little over a year apart. It was a blast, dude. The only thing better was BizarroCon, but Bizarro Hour was a lot of fun. We went to a coffee shop after hours, set up a live stream webcam, and there's a ton of people there, and we all read shit. We all read Bizarro shit, and we're gonna do the same thing, and hopefully we get some reading time, but if we don't, that means that some other great authors did and took our spots, but hopefully we get to do some readings. I did a reading from McHumans last year and threw out copies of Cockhammer on DVD at the last show, so we'll see what I can come up with for this one. And what are you gonna? A lot of times people write specifically for the event, like a 10-minute performance art piece. Sometimes people read from their work in progress. Sometimes people read from their newest release. What are you going to do, John Bruni, should you get an opportunity to read live?
Actually, I'm thinking about doing. I wrote this really short story for M Magazine, and it didn't get a lot of exposure because it was released, and I think they were having some issues with their company. I'm not entirely sure what the details are, but it took them months to actually start promoting it. And it's just one of the most vile, disgusting, filthiest fucking things I've ever written. And it's short. It'll probably take me like 5 to 7 minutes to read it. But it is so fucked up. It's hard to describe. It really is. I want to read that. I actually have the magazine. The artist who did the cover for that issue is actually Luke Spooner, who did Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks.
For some reason, I don't know why, but I thought you were going to say the person who did the cover for this magazine is actually dead.
And I'll be bringing his corpse on tour.
Do you have the cover? Show it to us.
Let me see if I got it. Hold on just a second. All right. Here we go. Let's try to get the glare out of there.
Ah, it's fucking awesome, man.
Yeah.
I have to be quiet because if I say anything, it pops you down to the small screen. So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. There you can see it looks very cool. The story is called Going Down. It starts out being about one thing and turns into something completely different. Something absolutely vile that will probably get people to leave.
I look forward to it, man. I hope you get to read it.
It's sickened me to write it.
That's great. Those are the best, man. Those are the best stories when you push your own fucking boundaries in whatever direction. So that's that. What do you want to tell? Fucking sell yourself, man. You got a book that just came out yesterday. Sell it.
Absolutely. Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks. It is probably the nastiest tale of the class war that you will ever read. Well, imagine Upton Sinclair doing, really, really nasty, futuristic Philip K. Dick / horror stuff. And you get Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks. It's about this group of rich guys that get together, and every year they have this contest in which they take all these poor people off the streets, people they don't think that anyone's going to ever miss, and then they pit them against each other in a battle to the death in this really nasty urban futuristic setting. And the rich people are just betting on who's going to die next, who's going to win, because there is a prize to the last person standing, and that prize is $1 billion. And to sweeten the pot, there's also one of the rich guys who likes to go out into the field and, kill some of the contestants himself, because he's just a big game hunter type guy. He's into Ernest Hemingway and killing stuff. And it's a really fucked up book. It harkens back to not just Philip K. Dick, but stuff like Running Man and Battle Royale, just things like that. Just really messed up, and it might break your heart. Some of it might break your heart. I've heard back from a few readers of the story, or for the novel, and they've said that two characters in particular are really heartbreaking. I've actually, so far, I've made a handful of people cry with these two characters. So, as fucked up as it is, it also has some kind of heart to it.
It's got some heart. It's got some characters that'll you'll be rooting for, that die. Thank you for that, John Bruni.
You're welcome.
Very much.
I'm looking forward to traumatizing all of you.
Now, I follow you on Facebook and Twitter. One of the things I've never asked you before, even in private, is you are a huge fan of Western television.
Yes, I am.
Now, I've always assumed that you just own all these series on DVD and just pop them in every night, but then I saw last week you were complaining that one of your shows had a skip week, or 2 or 3 skip weeks in the same season, and that led me to believe that you actually sit down in front of the telly and watch programs.
I do have them on DVD, but I also have the dates that they first aired, and I'm watching them on the 50th anniversary of the days that they actually aired on real live TV back in the day. So I've done it for Wanted Dead or Alive. I've done it for Have Gun Will Travel. I'm currently doing it for Rawhide and Gunsmoke. I'm going to be doing Gunsmoke for the next 10 years. I was on for 20 years. And I tried to do it with Maverick, but the DVDs just weren't available at the time. So I finally got them, and I'm just watching those in order. But
so tell me, why do you have such a passion for Western television?
It's just well, first of all, there are, well, as we were talking about before, there are the tropes, and a lot of them are repeated several times, and almost all of the Western shows, they stuck to those tropes. They didn't want to change anything because they knew, hey, this is a popular thing. Back in the day, almost all programs were Westerns, or at least the top viewed programs were Westerns. They had their formula, and they stuck to it, but then there are just a few shows, like the shows that I mentioned, the really good ones like those, they switch things up. Like, for instance, Maverick, the main character was a self-professed coward. He depended on his mind rather than his guns. He was a shifty poker player. He was usually the kind of villain that would stroll into town and on one of the other shows. It's just, these shows did something completely different. Have Gun Will Travel just brought things in just some weird, different way, because you look at the cowboy hero as kind of a violent animal sort of guy who just takes what he wants and that's it. But say Paladin, for example, Paladin is a gentleman. He goes around with the ruffles at his neck and his sleeves. He drinks the good shit. He's always getting laid at the opera. Things like that. But at the same time, he's not necessarily a mercenary, not necessarily a private investigator, but he wants to bring about justice in people, but at the same time, he still has that beast within him. If you piss him off, he's just an absolute animal, just violent as all fuck. and it's just that weird difference, that's the kind of thing that attracts me to shows like that.
Interesting.
I probably went on too far about that, but that is one of my passions.
What do you think it is different about the Western compared to the space opera or a barbarian drama? Because these shows, the hero's journey is sort of the same in all of these different genres. What do you think it is about the Western genre in particular that draws you to it so passionately?
Well, it's about you look at the way things are today, and you look at the past, in particular the Wild West, as it were, where there were laws, but very few ways of enforcing them. People could essentially do whatever the fuck they wanted. I mean, not all of them wanted to be animals and criminals and so on and so forth, but you could live your life the way you wanted to in an individualistic way. You didn't have to think about your neighbor's politics. You were just yourself. And now everything's just sort of locked down. You have to... You do... Law is pretty much all around you at all times. I mean, I'm not saying that law is a terrible thing, but sometimes it can be. Like the little tiny annoying laws that you have to deal with. Like, say for example, if you come to an intersection and then there's the red light, but nobody else is going through.
There's the red light and you can't fuck your sister.
Yeah.
What's up with that, John Bruni? If this was the Wild West, you could stop at a stop sign and fuck your sister. Right. What does the world come to?
What indeed?
I agree with you. We live in a nanny state. We as adults are treated like children. We are oftentimes harassed by law enforcement for hypotheticals. You could have hit a child because
right.
There's a school 1,000 feet away. It's Sunday night.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one was in the intersection. And I can't make the adult decision to travel through the stop sign without coming to a complete stop to make for your shits and giggles. And it's I could go on for hours and hours and hours. People hate when I get on a law enforcement kick because they believe that law equals morality equals the right thing to do. And I believe that at a certain point, law becomes legal robbery, and you literally have a man with a pistol walking up to your car while you're unarmed and saying, you now owe me this amount of money, and X amount of that money that I decided you owed me because of a hypothetical crime or a hypothetical accident you could have caused goes to my paycheck. It is a criminal behavior under any other circumstances. It's robbery under any other circumstances. We're not talking about T-boning a car and you're wasted and there's, stolen guns that you're going to sell to children in the trunk and trying to be like, fuck cops. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, for people like you and me who are not criminals, we are treated as such in an attempt to profit from bullshit laws that shouldn't pertain to adults. In my opinion, there's a difference. There are levels. We need law enforcement to handle criminals. We do not need law enforcement to tell me that I owe $120 because I was going 20 miles an hour over in their speed trap.
Yeah.
In the trap that they set in order to take my money. The whole point of it being to take my money, not to protect anyone, not to prevent an accident. They don't put speed traps in places where accidents happen. They put speed traps in places where the speed limit changes drastically in an amount of, and not necessarily too early for you to know, but very often people are still traveling at 55 miles an hour when the speed limit is drastically dropped to 35, and they can use that to their advantage in order to profit.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can actually offer a specific example from my own life. I was once pulled into a safety checkpoint, and they started giving me all sorts of, the basic tests for drunkenness. Now, I had probably had 3 or 4 drinks that night, and I wasn't swerving or anything. I wasn't putting people's lives in danger. There was no risk involved. I could still talk straight. I could still walk straight. Even the cops said that at the trial. But they put me through the ringer anyway. I couldn't. I didn't know what the limit was, so I didn't want to blow. But they did everything they could possibly do to get money out of me, that was it. I fought the whole thing the whole way through. I was found not guilty because the cop fucked up many times. They tried to get a whole shit ton of money out of me. That was the only reason for doing this. The guy told me that I spoke clearly. I had no problems getting out of the car. My car wasn't swerving. I wasn't putting anyone at risk. But they put me through all of that, and I hate to have lost all that money, but I'm glad that the money went to my lawyer instead of the court.
Here's the thing with, and some people are going to be like, you shouldn't have drank and drove. There's consequences, and what if you would have hurt somebody? Again, that hypothetical idea.
Exactly.
Here, in my personal life, I will not step behind a vehicle having even had one sip of alcohol for one specific reason. I'm not in a position where whatever the legal limit of alcohol is, I am put in a position by law enforcement to not be able to judge that in a scientific way before I get behind the wheel. Why is there a limit if I'm not given the tools to assess that limit?
Yeah.
Why can't I, with all the technology that conspiracy theorists say the government is putting into our credit cards and into our identification, why can't I blow on my identification and receive a number, whether, it's 0.08 in Illinois is the legal limit for blood alcohol content.
Yeah.
Why can't my identification card provide me with the information, be it a drop of blood or my breath or whatever, about what my blood alcohol content is? If that's too expensive, then there should be a zero tolerance policy for alcohol. You cannot drink and drive. You cannot do it at all. Zero tolerance. Because trying to tell me that there's a limit encourages me to get behind the wheel and make a judgment call while I'm impaired.
Yeah.
Right? So that they can then hit me with gigantic fines. Not trying to protect life. If they wanted to protect life, there would be a zero tolerance policy. They give you leeway in an attempt to extort as much money as possible from you in the event that they can catch you in the process.
Oh yeah, definitely. They got the only money they got out of me was the fee for towing my car. That was it. Otherwise, I was found not guilty, and rightfully so. But
well, I'm sorry that you went through
that.
that. I'm sorry that you went through that, John Bruni. My life advice is always don't drink and drive because they will fucking destroy your life if they can. And that's enough about cops, I guess, right?
Right.
There's people already tuned out because there are certain people that live their lives, and I don't fault them for it. They live their lives saying right is right and wrong is wrong, and police are there to protect the people that live right from the people who live wrong. And they don't think anywhere beyond that. And all they hear us doing is saying, oh, it makes it seem as though we expect that we're going to do things wrong in life and we just don't want to deal with the consequences of those things. It's not about that at all. It's about the system. The system is set up to create artificial consequences for hypothetical problems. That's my issue.
It also helps that we don't really look like citizens. I mean, I have this long hair and this big beard.
And I'm sitting here looking like the leader of a gang. Tattoos and my bandana.
Yeah, I've been hassled.
Honestly, that has a lot to do with it. I've been harassed by police my entire life, and it's not because I do anything wrong. It's because I fit the profile. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about profiling because it's pointless. But the whole thing is pointless because the system isn't going to change. I just sometimes express my views about it, but I want people to understand it's not because I don't want you to be protected when it counts. But we don't really. I don't know. We could do 10 hours on the subject of law enforcement and laws and hypothetical, real consequences for hypothetical actions. It's all ridiculous. Let's move on to the Ask Me Anything for those few fans left that just sat through a 10-minute diatribe from two guys talking about fuck cops. The point being, though, that you enjoy the idea of the Western. You identify with characters in Western stories because they could just pull out their gun and shoot cops in the fucking face if they didn't like if they didn't like the jive they came up talking, right?
Well, maybe not that far, but yeah.
No, they could. Yeah, they could.
They could.
Outlaws were sexy, right? Being an outlaw wasn't something that was looked down upon. It was looked at as a dangerous. Outlaws were the rock stars of the Wild West, right?
Yeah, you got dime novels written about you, and people started like look at Jesse James. Jesse James was a scoundrel, but he made for good press. So all of a sudden, he's a folk hero.
Don't we have the James Gang caves here in Missouri? Is that who it is?
You probably. I think it's either Missouri or Kansas. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure.
I think as you head southwest through Missouri, I want to say it's somebody's caves. It's either Jesse James or who was another Western criminal with two names?
Maybe the Youngers?
No. I think it was Jesse James. I think it was the James Gang, and I guess they came all the way up here and hid in caves. I have no idea. I just know that they're like state park monuments or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they were all raiders back during the Civil War, and even before the Civil War, with Bloody Bill Quantrill. So that was Missouri and Kansas.
Let's do this.
All right. First of all, I should mention that Teresa started this out with, here's where you can start posting questions you'd like Kevin to answer. Hint, the more uncomfortable, the better. And we do have some uncomfortable questions, so I hope you're ready.
Just to reiterate, Teresa Pollock has recently taken over the Bizarro Goodreads group, and she is doing a great job. She's firing up a bunch of authors. I think she's got like 6 or 8 months worth of authors lined up for the author of the month. She doesn't just do one book. She tries to do a book a week, or a book, at least 2 books from that author in their month, and she is just going out of her way to make this thing really popular for the authors and for the readers. So please participate. Don't make her, all this work that she's doing be in all for naught or in vain. Please participate. And she's also looking for help. She's literally buying copies of these books and holding contests and then mailing these books out to readers, on her own dime and on her own time before she goes to work, after she gets home from work. You can volunteer to help her and help get these books out into the hands of the readers. So check the Goodreads group out, and if you've got the time and the wherewithal, please contact Teresa and volunteer some time and help her work on these wonderful Author of the Month programs that she's doing.
All right, so we have a couple of people who ask multiple questions, and Pedro is one of them. There are quite a few.
Proenza.
Absolutely. Actually, he asked these 2 questions. I'm going to reverse these 2 questions. I'm going to ask you first, what is your favorite Bizarro book ever?
It's hard to, there's a lot of Bizarro books out there, and I've read a lot of them, a lot of diverse authors, and the cool thing about Bizarro is it's not, you can't even define the genre, let alone the styles of the authors or the multiple styles that authors use. So when you ask a question like that, it's really hard to answer because there's so many facets of Bizarro fiction. But if I have to narrow it down to one, I would say my favorite Bizarro book ever is Carlton Mellick's Zombies and Shit, because this book, it's a game show similar to what the game show from Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks. Have you read it? Have you read Zombies and Shit?
That one I haven't read. That's on my list.
It's basically a reality show where these contestants get dropped into the zombie apocalypse. Everybody lives on offshore in an island, not necessarily paradise, but sectioned off island where the poor people live in sector A, B, C, D, whatever, and the rich people live over here. But they have this game show where little flying balls go around and take these contestants as they try to survive in the zombie apocalypse. And they all get a unique weapon, and then little balls follow them around. And the coolest thing about this book is that it follows something along the lines of like 12, 13 different characters, and he's able to weave their stories, and it's not just their the book doesn't just follow one narrative where they're running through the game. It also gives you a little backstory of each character, and the backstory really leads to really interesting things about their personalities and why they're later going to do what they do as they try to survive and double-cross each other and team up together to get to the end goal, which is a single helicopter that can only bring one contestant out of the wasteland. And it's just so... It's so chaotic and so frenetic, but the way he's able to weave all of these characters in and out of this narrative is just it's a super fun, quick read. It's over 300 pages, but it's a super fast read because it's just go 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 go. But it was also inspiring, and it inspired me to try to tackle a similar idea of taking a gigantic number of characters like that. And the novel I'm working on, this is the 4th time I've referenced my own writing in this episode, so forgive me. I'm writing a novel called Gnome Mercy. Gnomes like the little lawn gnomes with the heads. And the idea being that everyone on Earth is turned into a gnome. They all have their own individual, unique gnome powers, but it's like the Highlander. When one gnome kills another gnome, he absorbs their power and becomes stronger. There can be only gnome. Next question.
The next question is, what is your favorite book ever?
I should have read these questions beforehand. My favorite book ever. Such a hard question to answer. That's going to change anytime you ask me that question, but for the sake of time, I'm going to say that my favorite book ever is Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright, because every person I ever made read that book got sick and just hated me for making them read it. Now, Chuck Palahniuk did something similar. Unfortunately, it was only in a short story that was sort of weaved into the novel Haunt, which is really a collection of short fiction that just has a thread that makes it all seem like it's part of one novel, where a bunch of authors are brought into a house and then they each write a short story, and so you see the point of view from each of these characters, and then you actually get the full short story from the characters. But the very first story in the book is called Guts. Have you read Guts?
I love that story.
That story makes people even more sick than Exquisite Corpse does for whatever reason, but I'm going to go with Exquisite Corpse because as a whole, as a novel, it gets the most reaction out of people, and it's one of those books where once I've read it and I've been disgusted, I feel like I have to pass that disgust on to others. So
that is a great choice.
There you go. Best I can do in a short amount of time.
Okay, so
what's your favorite book of all time, John Bruni?
And the Ass Saw the Angel by Nick Cave.
Why is that?
It is just such a dark yet hopeful story. It's kind of weird. It's just this backstory, this backwoods story of just nastiness and whiskey and all sorts of sexual perversion, and it's just great. And it's from the musician Nick Cave.
I was going to say, is it the same Nick Cave?
Yeah. It's really good.
Don't those people just make you want to fucking kill yourself? That are brilliant and successful in so many different aspects.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now here's a little aside, and we're never going to get to these questions if I keep doing this, but understand, folks, that once you make a brand name for yourself, your name can sell multiple things. Like, it's not just that Nick Cave is an especially great writer, maybe. Maybe he is. Maybe he's a brilliant writer, but had he, let me put it this way, had he only written that novel and not been the successful musician that he is, that novel may have never been picked up for publication. And maybe he wrote it first, and maybe he was a fucking great writer first, and then he became a musician. Do you know? Did he release that after?
He released it after he made his name. So,
as a name musician, it's going to be easier for you to then put that out there in the world, not taking anything away from him. As a writer, or his talent as a writer, it's just as a as an entertainer, once you achieve success in one area, it's going to be easier for a publisher or a record company or a film production company, if you want to make movies. It's going to be easier for them to accept, to be able to sell themselves, be able to sell your brand to their audience if you already have a built-in success from another area. So
oh yeah, Hillary Clinton writes a book. No matter what you think of her, a publisher would be a fool to turn that book away.
Next question. Next.
What is the first book that made an impression on you?
Stay out of the basement or Don't Go in the Basement? The Goosebumps.
I think it's Don't Go in the Basement.
It's number 2. Second. Yeah. I don't have them in order. I was going to grab it, but it'll take too long. I don't have them in order. Anyway, that's the very first Goosebumps book I ever read. I think I was in 5th or 6th grade. I went to the library, was looking through the young adult section, and I saw that cool cover with the slime that was kind of bubbled out, and, you know, like a fucking tree hand or whatever, a hand with fucking leaves coming off of it. And I checked it out, and the reason it's the first book that left an impression on me is because I was, at that same time, I was super into the anthology horror television shows. Tales from the Dark Side had come back.
Nice.
Twilight Zone had come back. There was a show on called Monsters.
Oh, I love Monsters.
Monsters had a really cool opening where it started off in space and it came down to Earth, came down to a small town, came down to a house, and it all looks cookie cutter, normal, suburban. And then whenever it goes in the house, all of the family are monsters, and they sit down to watch television together, and it's all done in claymation, isn't it? Or when they get inside, are they actually people?
I think they were actually people with makeup or masks on or something.
But getting down to it is claymation, and then it's it's real live action inside. Anyway, I love those short, because the way those anthology shows were always set up. You got your short story, your 30-minute episode or whatever, and there's always some ridiculous twist at the end of it. There's always some awful thing that means, there's always more monsters, there's always more death, there's always more double crossing, there's always more murder. Like, you never get out of those anthology shows alive. You never get out of them safe. No matter what, something fucked up happens. And so as I'm reading this Goosebumps book, and I get to the end, and there's the horrible twist ending that befalls the character after he thinks that he's, survived this monster. Here it is. No, you'll never escape. There's always something fucked up waiting for you around the last bend. And I got addicted to those Goosebumps books and R.L. Stine books in general because of that first book and because of my love of the short form horror. And the Goosebumps, they're standalone, but they're short. Those are short stories. They're the text type is huge, and they only number 100 or 120 pages anyway. So you're talking about, those things are probably between 12 and 15,000 words. So I was able to, at my peak, when I was reading Goosebumps books as a kid, I was reading 2 a day. Basically, as often as my library could get them in, I was consuming them. And that passion for fiction, that passion for horror, really started with that first Goosebumps book. Next question.
What made you want to start writing fiction?
I think it was on the show I did with Scott Cole. I talked about the access I had at the time when I was a kid, because at the same time I was watching the anthology horror shows and horror movies, renting VHS movies from video stores. Video stores were huge in the early 90s. And one of the best sellers at mom and pop video stores was exploitation horror movies. So they carried all kinds of fucked up shit, all the trauma stuff, you name it, they fucking had it. I loved that stuff. I loved, like I said, the Goosebumps stuff, the anthology television shows. I was a junkie for comic books, any of that crap. I loved it, and I had something in me was begging me to create, but in my household, we had no Commodore 64s. We had no word processors. We had a typewriter, and I was a shitty speller, and I always felt like, I know I talked about this before, so I'm trying to get through it quick. I always felt like when you're typing on a typewriter and you're putting words onto a page, that was the final draft. That was it. Like, so, and I could have written, pen to paper, but it just didn't. It seemed like because those cheesy movies and stuff, and Stephen King. When you saw him, they're typing on typewriters. I thought the only way you could write was on a typewriter, and I couldn't do it. So my passion sort of turned to drawing pictures, and so I would draw pictures of these monsters and come up with these elaborate backstories for them, but only in an oral way. I would tell people like, oh, this is this monster, and this is his name, and this is where he come from, this is what he does, and it never really went anywhere. And as I got older, drugs and sex became the things I wanted to do, and so I sort of left my creativity behind for the latter part of my teenage years, but it was really just dying to get out of me, and that's when I started writing short films. I still couldn't get myself to go back to fiction. Fiction seemed, it just seemed daunting. Like, if you write a story or a book, you can write about anything. And I wasn't ready yet. I hadn't lived enough life. I hadn't gone through enough personal struggle to realize that you can write that personal struggle into a story, or that you can use a monster as an allegory to that struggle and to that stuff that you go through. So it took me years, and I wrote a bunch of movies, and eventually, right before I turned 30, my girlfriend at the time dumped me, left me with left me with all the bills at the apartment, and an apartment lease all by myself. And then right after she left me, the transmission in my car, I only had one car, the transmission in my car blew up and I couldn't do my job. And I went through this horrible existential crisis at 30, basically an early midlife crisis, where I felt like I had to stop making movies, stop doing everything. And one day I realized I had actually bought Stephen King's On Writing, not to be a fiction writer, but just to help me as a screenplay writer, sort of hone my skills, so to speak, as a writer. But that book is so good and so inspirational, and I read it around the same time that all this happened, that as I went back to college and decided I didn't want to make any more movies because they weren't making me any money, and that I needed to be a responsible adult, around this time I realized I could write fiction and the methods that Stephen King was teaching me in this book, and it's not going to cost me anything. I can do my Joe job and go to college and all this, and at the end of the day, I can spend a couple hours scribbling down stories. And I had gone through so much fucking life at that point, so many fucking struggles and failures and heartbreak and awful shit that I could turn all that into stories and allegories of monsters and stuff. So that's what I did. I started writing fiction because I hit rock bottom in my life, felt like a complete loser, had no money, had to call my parents and beg them to give me the money to get out of debt so that I could go back to college. And once I did that, once I got my shit back together, I dropped out of college again and became a writer full-time because I don't learn from my mistakes. Next question.
All right, next we have, these are all from Pedro, by the way. The next one is, how did your film background influence your writing style?
Well, again, I grew up on trauma and exploitation films and low-budget horror films like Evil Dead and Dead Alive and The Italians, movies like The Beyond from Lucio Fulci and Suspiria from Dario Argento. See, I worked at a porn shop, and I think that question is in there later about what working at the porn shop, how that had an influence on me. So I'll answer that question later. But ask me the question again.
How did your film background influence your writing style?
I wouldn't be writing bizarro fiction today if it wasn't for the way I made movies. I made trauma-esque exploitation films, low-budget exploitation films, and I loved to do the titties and the gore and the monsters. And when I started writing fiction, I didn't think I could do that. The closest I'd ever read to anything like that was the splatterpunks in the mid-'90s, and I still felt like they were held back to a certain degree. And it's interesting watching interviews about splatterpunk fiction, the movement, from watching interviews with John Skip about it. He talked about how he and the people in his genre were trying to progress fiction more away from the sort of quiet horror that dominated the 60s and 70s in a way that in the 80s, when those exploitation low-budget horror movies started to take off on home video for mom-and-pop video stores, the same thing was not happening in fiction. You didn't see Class of Nukem High 3 in the video store, and you couldn't go to the bookstore and find the equivalent of that trashy extreme horror, sex, gore novel. It wasn't there. It took fiction a decade to catch up to where horror was on home video, and it was John Skipp and his gang that sort of ushered in that era. Whereas taking it even a step further, a step beyond where they took it, is where Carlton Mellick and the Bizarros, the other contemporary Bizarro cats like Kevin Schimmel and those guys that sort of D. Harlan Wilson, the other guys, Bradley Sands, the characters that sort of created the original gang of Bizarro fiction writers, they sort of grabbed things and took them even a step further down the field. And I feel like that's what I was making in film form. I was inspired by the Troma movies and the Full Moon Pictures Puppet Master movies and things like that, like the Peter Jackson films and the Sam Raimi films. I felt like that's where I was pushing those boundaries even further, making films like Cockhammer that were basically porno stories with horror elements, monsters and gore, and without actual real sex, but basically trying to push that boundary even further. Like, how disgusting and revolting and extreme and excessive can we get this? And I felt like at the same time, you started to have books like The Baby Jesus Butt Plug and Zombies and shit, and those kind of books finally started to come out with titles and covers and themes that were just like, what in the fuck is The Haunted Vagina? What is that? While I'm making movies like Colonel Kill Motherfuckers, they're writing books like The Haunted Vagina, and I feel like when I separated from film, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that was out there. So I tried to go back to the splatterpunk era and was trying to write things like Clive Barker and Poppy Z. Bright, really, extreme horror, but serious horror. Horror that didn't really push those boundaries I was pushing in film. But I wasn't happy with it. That's not who I was. That's not the kind of movies I was making. That's not my film style. Was begging me to write fiction that way. And so it was the discovery, it was the sort of like restlessness about writing these stories that I didn't feel like I had any passion for, because I've already done, if I've already made Cockhammer, why am I over here writing this like serious quiet horror? What is the point of that? So it was because of the way I made movies and my passion for filmmaking that I ever even found Bizarro Fiction. And then once I realized there was a market for it and other authors and a support system and a community, I was able to then thrive and become at least partially successful in this genre because of where I came from with film. Next question.
What are the tips you would give to someone interested in becoming a Bizarro author?
Read all of it. Right now you can buy the best Bizarro fiction of the decade, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, 2004-ish to 2014-ish. It follows maybe even a little over a decade. I think it follows about 12 or 13 years worth of Bizarro fiction. It's a monster of a book. I think it's over 400 pages. And right now you can get that on Kindle for 99 cents. And it's novellas and short stories from everyone who has influenced the genre of Bizarro, which, again, is undefinable and unclassifiable. Everyone's different, but it's the quintessentially... Bizarro fiction is the quintessential genre of surprise. You are going to find so many surprising stories in that book, or any of the starter kits. There's a lot of overlap between stories that are in the best Bizarro fiction of the decade and the starter kits. If I'm correct, I haven't read the Bizarro fiction of the decade yet. I bought it, but I think there's some overlap there. Maybe there's not. Maybe Cameron Pierce is the editor. He may have chosen completely different stories from anything that's in the starter kits. I'm not sure. But those two things, the best Bizarro fiction of the decade and the Bizarro starter kits. If you haven't read those books, you don't understand the lack of limitations. Basically, you don't understand the scope of the genre of surprise, of what you can do, of how crazy you can get in Bizarro fiction. The second tip, and I'll leave it off at 2, is you have to think of Bizarro fiction as too many people, John Bruni. They look at Bizarro fiction, since it's a relatively new genre, as a place that you can go as an amateur author. And it's just not true. It's like you want to be a painter, but you only want to be an experimental painter that does things in this completely unique way. You know how the only way, and this is a cliche tip, but there's nothing but truth to it. And that's why it's become such a cliche. Because you ask any author or artist or musician, they're going to tell you the same fucking thing. You can't come out of the box experimenting. You have to learn the fundamentals. You have to learn the rules before you break the rules, John Bruni. So my second tip is, if you're a brand new writer and you love the idea of this endless horizon, no rules at all, you can't start there. You have to start with the rules. Pick something else. Spend 2, 3, 4, 5 years writing something that's not Bizarro. Reading science fiction, reading fantasy, reading mystery novels, crime novels, reading westerns. Learn to write like that before you try to break the rules. Learn the rules and master them before you break them. Tip number 2. Next question.
Here's the last question from Pedro, and it might be the most interesting.
We're still on the first guy.
Yeah. I think there's only one other guy who submitted a lot of questions, but here's the last one from Pedro. Can I rub my belly on your belly at next year's BizarroCon?
Yes! Next question.
All right, from Rich, we have, you definitely have a knack for writing action sequences. Do you credit this to your experience writing and producing films?
There's a lot of filmy questions. Okay, I couldn't write action scenes because it would have required my cast to have skill, or me to either have the ability to, or hire a choreographer. So most of the action scenes in my movies are just people talking to each other, and then one of them happens to kill the other one. It's a lot of standing and talking in my films, or sitting and talking. What do I credit my action scenes to? I guess as a film watcher and a reader, that's just what I like. I mean, I like busy. I like my my stuff to stay busy. I like big, grand, crazy shit. I love the bigger and more complex the fighting, the better. So as a writer, I'm trying to entertain myself first and foremost, right, John Bruni?
Absolutely.
I'm my first reader.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
as I'm developing my stories, I love to, and what Rich is talking about is, in a lot of my fiction, huge portions of my books will take place in the middle of giant battles. My little novella or novelette, The Humans Under the Bed, for example, it starts in the middle, like a war erupts from humans who have lived underground for 500 years and learned and basically converted themselves all into battle mechs, into having these metal exoskeletons with which to fight the monsters that defeated them 500 years previous. The monsters now live above ground in the houses and work monster jobs and have monster families and monster kids. The humans come up out of the ground. They think the humans are all dead. The humans come up out of the ground and they start fighting basically from page number 2, and the fight never ends. The fight doesn't end until the last page. So it's this big war, and my characters are thrust right in the middle of it. The little kids from this particular family are thrust right in the middle of this adult war and are forced to function and survive throughout the entire thing. And it doesn't slow down for a second. So all the character development, all the dialogue, all of the plot development and twists and turns, the climax all take place within this war. So why do I do that? Because it keeps it going. It's interesting. It keeps the process going. I mean, I really like war movies like that. the war flicks that just like start in the middle of the war and just like Saving Private Ryan, where they throw you down in the fucking middle of it and never let you up for a second. That's just, I mean, I guess that as a writer, that's one of my go-tos. I really like to put people in the middle of battle and keep them there. Next question.
This is also from Rich. You've edited your fair share of Bizarro short story anthologies. Are there any common elements that you found lacking in the submissions that were rejected?
Yeah, it's the same thing that I was saying earlier. It's a lot of amateur authors that believe that since there are few rules in Bizarro, that it would be easier to write in that genre or easier to be published. And those they don't. A lot of those submissions, they just weren't ambitious enough. When you don't know the rules, when you don't understand what you're trying to break, when you don't understand how you're trying to surprise readers that have read everything, it just comes off as underwhelming. You have to know you have to read Bizarro to understand how far the boundaries have been pushed, and you have to read outside of Bizarro to understand what people have already read a million times and are looking for something different. Next question.
Last question from Rich. Don't you find it astounding that Teresa and I live in the same small West Virginia town?
Yes, next question.
Moving on to Donald. What puts you at mode? I seem to have an idea, then run with it, but when I get stuck, I don't know where to go from there.
What was the question?
It's really oddly worded. I think he's asking what gets you in the mood for writing, I guess, and what happens when you get stuck and don't know what to do.
I'm always in the mood because I love stories. I love to tell stories. I do a 2-hour fucking show, for fuck's sake, where I just talk to one guy. I mean, this doesn't ever stop. This is go, 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 go. So, to me, writing is just like picking, like the radio's always on, and for me, writing is picking out the songs that I like from the radio station that's constantly broadcasting in my brain. So there's, some days I'm tired and some days I'm not, but there are days that I don't get to the computer and I don't get to start typing. But if I get to the computer and I start typing, I'm there. I'm in the zone. What puts me there? A good story. A good story in here that is just begging to get out, and that'll get me to a computer faster than if I don't really have anything to write about, or if I'm in the middle of a book and I'm not really feeling that day. It doesn't mean I'm not going to write, but what puts me in the mood or mode to write the easiest is having a great story to tell. But the other thing would be just getting to work. As soon as my fingers hit the keyboard and I start and I get my first 200, 300, 400 words down, I'm in the zone and I take off. And what's the second part of that question is what happens when I get stuck?
Yeah.
I don't get stuck. Learn to not get stuck. Next. No. Let's take a second there, and I'll get your opinion on this too. But really, I think that writers who get stuck writing stories, they need to read more. They need to read more stories. Because the process, the mechanics, the building blocks, if you think of writing a story, I almost said Stone Cold. Stone Cold writes like this. Stephen King in his book On Writing suggests that the analogy he uses is he is uncovering dinosaur bones. When he sits down to write, he's uncovering the story. He's got a vague idea of what it is, but the process of writing uncovers the mystery of the story and allows him to see the whole thing. Okay? My take on it would be every story is a Lego set, and all the pieces are there. If you just randomly pick up Legos, you're not necessarily going to be able to build a castle. But once you've built enough castles, you don't necessarily need to have all of the pieces to that castle directly in front of you. Your big box of Legos, if you've built 100 castles, you're going to know what to grab from your box of Legos, right?
Yeah.
and you're going to be able to build castles, and you're going to be able to build castles off diagram. You're going to be able to design your own because you're just so experienced with it. You've done it so many times by the book. You've bought the castle in a box that has the diagram, how to build the castle, and only the pieces to build the castle. That's reading. That's reading and writing over and over and over and over and over again, to the point that you can set that diagram aside and start building your own designs. And that, as a writer, a professional writer, or just as a veteran writer, is what you're aiming for. That's your goal. If you are struggling, if you're hitting points in your stories where you can't finish them because you don't know what to do next, you're still in the practice mode, and that's fine. That's where you should be. You have to be there in order to get past that. You can't. I like to use analogies in martial arts. If your goal is to do the perfect spinning back kick into a heavy bag, you're not going to do that the first time you try. Don't get discouraged whenever you go to your sensei and say, well, what happens when I throw a kick and it doesn't land? He's only going to answer with one answer. Kick it again. Right? Kick it again. Keep reading and keep writing. Eventually you'll get to a point where you have so many areas you can go with your story, you can't get stuck. There's no way to get stuck. There's 9, 10, 20, a million, infinity ways to end your story or to continue, to write a story. So at a certain point, your eyes open, you become enlightened enough as a storyteller to know that if you get part of the way down this path and it's not working, to switch to this path and maybe come back to this one if this is the ending you like. Maybe your characters, and that's when I talk to my guests about characters making decisions for themselves, that is the confidence of the writer talking. That's the writer trusting in himself and his characters that they're going to make interesting decisions and that he's going to be able to get them through it. Now, that so as an experienced writer, you don't get to a point where your character meets a crossroads and you don't know which direction to go. You just let him pick one. And if that one doesn't work, pick a different one. Or find a creative way to bridge the two. He goes halfway down this path, crosses back over, and finishes the way you intended him to finish to begin with. Does that make sense, John Bruni?
Oh, absolutely. It completely makes sense.
Give me your take on it. What do you do when you get stuck?
I don't really get stuck. I hit patches when there's just a particular scene that it's absolutely necessary to write. There's just no way around it. But it's kind of boring to me, and it's kind of a slog to get through, and I don't feel really motivated to do it. And I just eventually power through it, and I'll just think I'll fix it when I do the next draft.
And that's exactly the right thing to do. I was going to cut you off, but you finished with the exact statement I was going to make. Is no matter what path you send your character down, that's not the end of the day. You can go back and fix it and in fact, I think a lot of times if you're looking at it from the Stephen King analogy, when you're uncovering that dinosaur bone, you're never going to know how long it is until you brush the dirt off of it. In other words, until you write your rough draft, you're never going to know what you could do better. You're never going to know what you could do instead of what you've already done that you don't like until you've done what you don't like. If you just stop at the crossroads and say, well, fuck, I don't know what to do, then you don't know what to do until you know what's at the end of the path. You got to walk down there with your character. You got to write your scene, and whenever you get to the end, if you don't like it, you've already walked the path. You've already uncovered the bone. You know what the basic structure is. Now you go back and rewrite it and rebuild it and you refine it, and everybody does it. It's like a sketch. It's like an artist. You don't start with your final lines and your color. You start with a sketch. Here, my character's dick is 9 inches long. Oh, it's such a big dick. Oh, it's got so many veins on it. But you're sketching those veins, right? Because in the end, you might decide that this dick doesn't have any veins. The veins just might not be good for this particular 9-inch dick, right, John Bruni?
Exactly. As writers, we are all Scott Bakula on Quantum Leap. We can go back and put right what once went wrong.
So it's confidence, right? You have to have the confidence in yourself to go into the dark room and illuminate it. You can't look at the dark room and say there's nothing in there. Of course there's something in there. That's your fear talking. That's you second guessing yourself as a writer. The only way to write good, the only way to write well, the only way to write good fiction is to write bad fiction first and turn it into good fiction, right?
That's true.
Next question.
The next few are from Frank. The first question is, do you ever envision a time when you will have children?
Holy shit. All right. All right, well, I'm 34 years old and I don't have any kids, and there's a reason for that, because I grew up in a small town where people hooked up, usually with their high school sweetheart, started cranking out kids at 17, 18 years old, hated each other's guts by 2021, separated, and had the stupidest custody battles, which almost always ended with the guy being stuck with fucking child support payments for the rest of his kid's childhood. I watched that happen, and I didn't want that to be me, so I decided I was going to wait until I met someone that I could truly be in love with and truly have the kind of communication and relationship with, that I didn't have to be so wary of that impending divorce and custody battle, because I didn't want to pay child support for a kid I would never be able to see, whose mother was a cunt to me 7 days a week, right? That's no life to live. That's nothing for people to have to go through, and yet millions of people go through it for no reason. They make those choices out of fear of being alone, or because they see everyone else doing it, or it's just not the lifestyle that I wanted for myself. And the tricky thing about it is, the older you get, the more you realize you can live without those things, the more picky you become. And so at 34 years old, it's even harder for me to see myself meeting that woman that I'm going to trust enough to not divorce me and take my children and all my money. So, the answer to that question would be absolutely. I would love to have children if I met the right woman in the right circumstances, and financially in my life, it wouldn't be a struggle or a burden on the children, not on myself. I don't want to raise children in poverty. I can live in poverty myself. I accept the poverty, the starving artist lifestyle for myself. I could never put children through that. Next question.
This one is pretty lengthy, so brace yourself. You open the fridge. All you have on hand is a tub of spreadable butter, a bulb of garlic, 2 slices of individually wrapped processed cheese product, and a moldy wedge of brie. You've gone to the fridge not because you're hungry, but because you're horny. There's a chick in your bedroom, ready to go, but she needs a sex toy, and she has an insatiable food fetish. Construct an imaginary sex toy / device out of the items you have on hand in the fridge. Describe what it stimulates and how it accomplishes the goal.
Wow. Frank spent way much more time constructing, writing that.
How long that is.
He spent way more time writing that question than I'm going to spend answering it. I would shove it. I would shove it all up her ass. Next question.
Still from Frank. Who would win in a fight, Squishy or Rocco?
Ooh, Squishy being the famous overweight cat of Jeff Burke, editor of Deadite Press. And Rocco being this little character right here. Where is it? There it is. Who do you think would win? Who do you think would win?
He looks like a tough motherfucker.
You know why he would win? Rocco wins this fight because Rocco is a polydactyl cat. All right? You know what that means, John Bruni?
Has extra fingers?
He has... He fucking hates me for doing this. Look, he's biting me. Ow! Ow! He has 6 individual claws.
Wow.
6. Most cats have 4. That means I have the feline equivalent. I'm trying to... It's all backwards. Can't do it. Can't get it. Each of those, you can't... He's got... His hair's too long on his toes. I'm trying to expose his claws. He has 6 individual claws on all 4
Holy shit.
of his feet. So that means he has a grand total of 8 extra claws. 8 more claws than Squishy does. That means I own the feline equivalent of Wolverine.
Nice.
And you will slash poor Squishy to death. And Jeff, you can blame Frank for making me hypothetically kill your cat, because in my perfect world, right, Squishy being a female and Rocco being a male, they would fight, and in the process, Squishy using her girth and her, obviously she's going to be stronger, her strength against Rocco's cunning and extra claws, they're going to fight each other to the brink of death, and in the process, such a respect for each other's skills causes a spark of love. Squishy and Rocco, they stop fighting. They start fucking. John Bruni. And they have Squishy Rocco hybrid children that are giant poofballs of claws. Giant multi-clawed monsters that they then use to take over the world. That's the answer to that question. Next question.
They're the Bizarro feline power couple.
Yes.
Okay. Here's another interesting question. Actually, it's kind of a request. But at first, a request, not a question. Stick your finger up your ass to the first knuckle. Now remove it. Was that difficult to do? What does it smell like?
Done it before. It smells like shit. Next question.
And here, still yet another question from Frank. Do you arrange the toys at your writing desk according to what you are writing?
All right. Frank is talking about that over there is the Strange Desk. And I have, as you can see, I have a big old Strange Head mask. I've got a trophy that I've won for fiction. I've got a bunch of lanyards from horror conventions, and I also have a ton of toys. And the answer to Frank's question is I don't ever fuck with them because I'm lazy. Next question.
Have you ever written in the nude? If yes, tell us what works you recall writing in that state.
Well, I write a lot of erotic fiction, so oftentimes I have to take a break to masturbate because I write a lot of. I mean, because as an erotic fiction writer, my goal is to write the type of fantasies that I have as a sexual person that I've never seen before, that I've never read in a book or watched in porn or done in my own personal life. So it's a mixture of past experiences with females that have been kind enough to let me have sex with them, and fantasy fulfillment of things that I want to happen that a lot of times are unrealistic and not going to happen. So when I'm doing that, when I'm in the process of that, a lot of times I make myself super horny and jerk off. That's that question. What about you, John Bruni? You write erotic fiction. Do you write till you jerk off?
Actually, I've done that twice. I have done that twice. But I don't usually write in the nude. I don't think I ever have, actually. But I have gotten myself hard by the mere act of writing some kind of sex scene, and I've jerked off twice because of that.
I do it all the time, whatever that says about me. Next.
Do you find it easier to write about something you detest or something you love?
That's a good question. That's a real good question. Would I rather write about something I hate or something I love? I think that it's well, it comes from the same place. It comes from a place of passion. So I've written stories about people that I absolutely fucking hate, and I put them through the worst possible torment and torture that I can as catharsis for what's happened in my real life. And I've also written fantasy fulfillment where things that I would, that I would love to happen to me, or that, things that I love that that I would love to happen to me or someone, you know, like just fantasy fulfillment. And I think that I feel better when I write about the things that I love, the fantasy fulfillment. I think I feel better afterwards, but the writing about something or someone that I hate, it satisfies that restlessness that I have, or that unresolved anger that I have for that particular thing or person or experience. It can sometimes put that to bed. It can sometimes exercise that demon that's haunting me, but it doesn't make me feel good. What makes me feel good is writing about cool fantasies that I have that I can't necessarily do or haven't done yet. So uh, I can't say that I do one more often than the other. I do whichever one I need to do, but obviously the good one is the one that leaves me feeling the best. So one is done out of a need to exercise a demon. The other is done as a way to live through a fantasy. They both have their place. Next question.
This is the last question from Frank. It's a two-parter. Name 3 great things about working in an adult store, and conversely, 3 unexpectedly shitty things about working in an adult store.
Okay, that's the question I remembered looking at about porn shop. So I worked at a porn shop for 6 years. I started managing a porn shop at 19 years old, and I did that till I was 25. And the first thing that I'll say about that experience is that it wasn't just a porn shop. We also sold buy-sell trade on non-adult movies. So I basically worked in one of the last remaining mom-and-pop video stores. It was just done in such a way that we actually made our profit on porn, and then did the turnaround, the cheapy buy-sell trade, used VHS and DVDs on the non-adult stuff. Now, having a ton of time in a porn shop, because people, you know, come and go. It's not the kind of job that has a rush or anything. You sit there, you're a clerk, and you handle the customers as they come, and there's long periods of time, as anyone knows that has been a clerk anywhere, that you just kind of sit around with nothing to do. So me and all my friends that I got jobs there would sit around and watch movies, the non-adult movies. So I was able to, that's what turned me into a cinephile, was being in this room full of every movie ever made on fucking VHS, and being able to pop them into a VCR and just watch everything. Talk to my friends. What's your favorite movie? What's your top 10 list of all the greatest, you know, horror exploitation movies of all time? And then being able to walk out there and grab them and watch them. This was before the internet. This was when dial-up internet was still going on, so you weren't downloading movies. You were not downloading movies from the internet. You had to track them down in a physical form. So I was very lucky in that I was able to, I had access to almost everything, and watched a fuckload of movies. So the reason I got into filmmaking, the reason I eventually got into writing fiction, is because I managed this porn shop, and I was able to watch all the movies. So that's number 1. Number 2, the ton of downtime also allowed me to be creative, and I often drew pictures and wrote movies, and sort of developed the whole idea of being an indie filmmaker and traveling to conventions and all that. I did all that in my time sitting at the porn shop, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for customers to come in and rent transsexual hookers from Mars. The worst part about it was, believe it or not, when you're in an industry like porn, and I've heard many horror stories from many people that have worked in the kind of porn shop that I worked in. Now, when people think porn shop, they think booths where guys come in and jerk off, and you have to clean that stuff. I did not work in that environment, and most people don't. Most porn shops now are lingerie shops that sell, you know, cheapy DVDs, and that's about it. They sell sex toys, and they sell lingerie, the kind of stuff that you either have to buy on the internet or you buy physically. A lot of guys, they're raincoaters. Raincoaters meaning they hide their lifestyle from their wives and families, and as raincoaters, they don't want to buy things and have them sent to their homes, so they go out and they buy them from shops, and that's really the only thing that exists now. Everybody's jerking off to free porn on the tube sites on the internet, so nobody's actually buying porn, but they still have to buy dildos and butt plugs and fleshlights to stick your dick in, and lingerie to cross-dress, and all that stuff. You know, strippers buy a lot of their garments from these lingerie shops. So that's the kind of environment that I worked in. I didn't work in a lingerie shop. That's what exists now. But I worked in a store that we just strictly rented and sold DVDs and VHS movies. In that environment, however, the owners of these businesses, and this is true for these lingerie businesses that still exist today, tend to be some of the most conservative fucking douchebags on the face of the planet. They act like they have to act more professional. They have to be more conservative. They have to be more corporate and business-minded than the next guy to overcompensate for the fact that they make their living off of smut. These guys have such like self-loathing and shame over the business that they're in, even though they claim to love it. And my boss was one of the biggest jackoffs I've ever met in my life. As a 19-year-old kid that didn't know shit, this guy was just a fucking douchebag. And to this day, I still have dreams of arguing about this fucking guy, arguing with this guy in the porn shop, because we would fight over this kind of stuff, where I would tell him, like, dude, we just made $700 selling butt plugs to a stripper. Don't fucking tell me that the pants I'm wearing aren't professional enough. Get the fuck out of town. You know what I mean? And I eventually walked out of the store and quit the business because I couldn't deal with the conservative nature of this guy. And that is like the biggest issue, the biggest misconception that people have about those porn shops is that they're run by cool people. They're not. They're run by fucking idiots. And we're just gonna, well, catching people jerking off sucks. That's 2. The third is I don't know. Next question.
Actually, I do have one. This wasn't actually asked, but I do have a question about that. Did you ever have anyone trying to return like dildos or blow-up dolls or stuff like that?
The return thing was, we had a policy that if you returned your videotapes covered in lube, we wouldn't accept the return. We had late fees and late charges. So the idea being, if you bring your shit back covered in the lube you used to jerk off with, take that shit back, clean that shit off, give me a clean tape, or you're gonna buy it. And at the time, DVD or VHS movies, in the, we're talking 1999, 2000, 2001, they cost about $35 to $45 after the markup. So we're basically saying, like, you rented that for $3 and then you fucking jerked off on it. So take that back and clean it up, or you owe us $35. We had to express the no returns on the dildos. Nobody really ever fucked with us about that. It was more the videotapes having lube on them that caused the biggest problem.
Okay.
Any other porn-related questions?
No. Just so we're all on the same page. The next question comes from Tom. What's the 5-year plan, or if that is too far in the future to consider, what are your goals for the next year?
These are fucking hard questions, dude. All right. Like I said earlier in the show, my goal for the beginning part of this year was to really hone my short story skills to the point that I could, the conception of the short story, I would be able to hit a word count for an anthology or a magazine that was, requesting a certain cutoff point, because I had a lot of trouble with that. That's the thing. The reason that I say that was a weak point for me was I would set out to write. I used to set out to write like a 5,000-word story, and it would end up being a 15,000-word story, because I would outline 8 scenes and 3 different character perspectives. You're just never going to write a 5,000-word story like that. And if you do, it'll come off as rushed and just as a summary instead of an actual story with feeling and emotion and description. It's impossible. So that was my kind of short-term goal, and I've hit that a lot, and I'm really starting to. I promised a publisher that I would turn in a novel by December 31st. So I'm now 3 months behind on that. It's time to get back to work on those novels. I have 3 in progress and a whole shitload that I want to write. So my 1-year plan is to get back to work and get those manuscripts into the publisher's hands, because that publishing process, even the rejection process, can take 5-6 months to even hear back that they're not interested in your material. So I need to really, I'm kind of in a dark period right now, where even if I turned in a manuscript tomorrow, I might not have anything published until 2016. So it's time to get rolling on that. 1-year plan is finish the novels, as many of them as I can this year. And the 5-year goal Where does Kevin Strange want to be at 40 years old? I've told myself in the past that if I haven't found financial success, being that my main course of income is from literature that I write, be it short stories or the money I make from published novels, if that's not happening by the time I'm 40, my plan is to write 3 spec scripts to the best of my ability, Hollywood-level spec scripts. And a spec script is say you write a Batman movie with no intention of ever having that Batman movie made, but showing it to studios that aren't Warner Brothers, that couldn't possibly make a Batman movie if they wanted to, but they know who Batman is, and they've read the Batman, or they've watched the Batman movies, so if they read your Batman script, if you can write Batman, and it's good, you can write what they want you to write. That's the idea behind spec script. Is also used. That terminology is also used for you getting a writing gig that's not going to necessarily have your name on the final screenplay in the actual production, but you did work on it. If at 40 years old I haven't found success in literature yet, I'm going to write I'm going to write the 3 best things that I've ever written in my life, and I'm going to move to LA, and I'm going to try to make it as a screenwriter. On the big screen or the small screen, it doesn't matter which. Because as I get older and older, there are going to be, at 40 years old, I'm still not old, but there's very little time left for me to do things like that. So if I'm ever going to make a run at LA to be a movie writer or a TV show writer or a comic book writer, 40's the cutoff for when I have to make that happen. And then after that, so then at 40, then I can make the decision, well, how long am I going to pursue Hollywood screenwriter as a career before I give up on that too? And I'll never stop writing fiction. The idea being, right now I'm going to write as many novels as I can and as many short stories as I can and become as successful as possible as a writer for the next 5 years. If at the end of those 5 years I haven't found financial success, it doesn't mean I'm never going to write a book again. It means that I have to attack the other goals I have in life before I'm too old to attack them. So that's that. That's my 1 year and my 5 year goal.
Okay. Our next.
Do you have a 5 year goal, John Bruni?
Not necessarily, although I have a really good. I do have a good backup plan if I'm not financially successful as a writer.
A noose in your garage?
Not necessarily that far. I mean, like yourself, I could never stop writing because that's just such a big part of what I do. It's my addiction. That's what I do. But I'm just going to keep plugging away, doing the same thing that I do. Obviously, trying to figure out different things, different ways to do it, but still essentially the same thing. And if that really isn't working out, then I have a pretty good, square job to fall back on. So that will keep me fed, housed, while I pursue trying to get a bigger name out there.
Next question.
All right, the next question. I'm sorry. It looks like Frank has a couple more questions. His next question is: you've mentioned dabbling in film again. What sort of challenges / learning curves would you face in this new, extremely accessible age of movie making?
I just watched 3 movies last night from the producer of the Judge Dredd movie that just came out recently called Dredd 3D. This motherfucker is so crazy. He's taking his Hollywood money and he's making what he calls bootleg, but basically fan films of anything he wants to do, and does it and is putting them out for free. And these movies, dude, he just did the one that's in the news right now is he just did a Power Rangers with what's his name, James Vanderbeek from Dawson's Creek, and Katie Sackhoff from Battlestar Galactica. Yeah. And it is fucking awesome. It's this huge production that looks like it cost a couple $1 million, and he just threw it out there for free. He's also done a Venom short film with Jason Stackhouse from
Oh yeah, yeah.
True Blood, and he did a fucking killer Punisher short film. In addition to that, he did a 6-part miniseries of Judge Dredd animated films, and he's putting these all out on the internet for fucking free. And that means that when it looks like it costs a couple $1 million, it maybe cost $20,000. We are in a place now where doing green screen special effects is so cheap, and the processing power of these computers and the programs that you use to create the digital special effects they're so accessible and so cheap now that there is no excuse not. You just do whatever you want. The way we write fiction is literally the way filmmakers with access to just a little bit of money make films. They can do anything they want. There is no limitation to what you can do in film. So the learning curve being hooking up with the motherfuckers that know how to do that, because I don't. So that's why I say at 40, if I haven't found my success as a fiction writer yet, and because I've already done movies, so I could go the rest of my life. If I can find success writing novels, I'll write 3, 4, 5, 6 novels a year for the rest of my life. If that's my full-time job, so be it. I would love it. There's no shortage of ideas. However, if at 40 I haven't achieved that, then I'm going to LA and I'm going to try that route, which is, people would be like, well, that's even harder. I don't know about that. I think they're about equally as hard. Making a living as a novelist is really fucking hard. Making a living as a Hollywood screenwriter is really fucking hard. This is the life I've chosen. These are the goals that I have, and I'm not going to allow any amount of logic or reason to get in my way. I'm gonna pursue these goals until I die. That's all there is to it. Like I said, I haven't brought children into poverty yet, so the only thing that would derail any of this would be to accidentally knock someone up and have a kid that I couldn't look in the face every day if I couldn't give him a great life. So, and I go to great lengths to not knock people up. That's how I've made it to 34, and I don't have any kids. So I have several methods. If you'd like to talk about how I achieve this, it's very simple. You don't ejaculate inside of a woman's vagina. You don't ejaculate inside a woman's vagina every day for a month and then act shocked when she ends up pregnant. We only did it a couple of times. Motherfucker, you only did it a couple of times a day, every day for months on end. When you knocked her up, that's what happens. It's a biological process. Don't act shocked when it happens, man. She said she was on the pill. Don't trust it to be her responsibility. You take responsibility for your own ejaculation. Next question. Did I even answer the question? What was the question?
It's you went way off book on that one. But you essentially addressed it. What sort of challenges, learning curves would you face in this new, extremely accessible age of movie making? I think you did address that, but you went above and beyond.
Next question.
This is the last question from Frank, and it's a simple one. Would you go down on Stevie Nicks right now?
Yes, next question.
Moving on to Seamus, whose question is, and I think you already addressed this with Chainsaw Mantis, what's the next book about?
Insects fucking. Next question. See how easy that is? You just gotta find your hook. Find your hook, and you got it, man. When someone asks you what your book is about, don't describe the fucking plot to them. Their eyes will just, they'll get the 50-yard stare. So there's this character named Marcus, and he's a really good guy, but he has a really fucked up past. And see, Marcus, he meets this girl, and shut the fuck up. What's it about? What's it about?
Insects fucking, apparently.
Next question.
At this point, Teresa interjected to remind everyone that Danger Slater is also a part of the whole Stranger Danger giveaway. And she asked everyone to feel free to ask her some pervy and uncomfortable questions, oddly enough, right here on this thread. So they asked Danger a question. Even though,
I'm going to answer it as Danger Slater.
That's exactly what I want. Just do your imitation of Danger Slater. And the question for... Okay, Danger question. Would you mail a copy of Dangerama to Will Smith? What do you think he would think?
Well, basically, I'm more famous than the Will Smith anyway. I mean, that guy, he probably already knows who I am. Probably already owns a copy of my book. So, I mean, I'm Danger fucking Slater. You know what I'm saying? He should find a copy of fucking Get Jiggy With It and send me that shit in the mail. Next question.
Okay, the next question is...
Shout out to Jersey.
Joe Piscopo? Those are actually all the Goodreads questions. Although I did say that I had a question that I wanted to add. And that question is, what was your last dream like? And essentially, how does that fit into your writing?
What was my last dream? I can't remember what. I dream every single night. Some people don't dream. I have elaborate dreams every night. A lot of times they have to do with relationships that I have, past relationships with people. Like I said, I have a recurring dream. It's different every time, but I have recurring dreams about my ex-boss. He was one of the biggest conflicts of my life because I was trying to, grow up and create my own identity and my own philosophy on life, while he basically tried to tell me that everything about everything is futile and wrong and stupid, and you shouldn't try to do anything because you'll just fail anyway. And that is a heavy fucking thing to put on somebody. And this is a brilliant guy, member of Mensa, former physics professor in college, who just quit everything in his life and decided to run porn shops because he just became so nihilistic. And he really did try to infect everybody with that disease, and he was like the smartest person I had ever met at that point, one of the only people that I knew that had done something like graduate college and become a physics professor. So he knew a lot about a lot of things, and I really soaked that up, and he became a mentor to me, but that relationship turned poisonous. The more self-destructive he became, the more he tried to ruin his own life. He tried to drag me down with him, and I was able to escape that, and I was able to develop my own confidence, and I was able to develop my own philosophy. See, my father was relatively absent in my life, so this guy was a father figure to me in my late teenage years, the father figure that I never had. The guy that was really gonna steer me towards, he could work on cars, he could do math exceptionally well, and teach me physics and teach me about astrophysics and things about the galaxy we live in, the planet around us. And he was a wealth of knowledge, again, in the early days of the internet, where a lot of this stuff wasn't accessible. You didn't have TED Talks and stuff where you could really learn about these kinds of things on your own unless you were in college to learn about them. And the relationship went really south, but I was able to get away from it, and subconsciously he's still there. He's still in my head and still tries to talk me down. He's my demon that lives on my back, trying to tell me that all this is worthless and there's no point in anything. We're all going to just die anyway, and of course there's no afterlife. We just end up in an endless void of nothingness. We cease to exist, so what's the point of any of it? That sort of is always looming over my head. So that's a recurring dream I have. I don't quite remember exactly what the last dream I had was, but those dreams are very often inspirations for short stories. I had a dream a few weeks back about two children standing in front of a funeral home, and something with an adult, and something absolutely awful was going to happen once those kids went into that funeral home. And the dream didn't tell me what that was, but in my waking, as I was waking in the morning, it kind of took control of that dream. It sort of became, and you never know how long you're in them. Sometimes they feel like they last forever. Sometimes they feel like they only last a second. But in my waking moments, I took over the what do they call that when you take over your dream?
Latent dreaming.
What is it?
Latent dreaming.
Yeah, I took over and really started to develop this story as I was waking up, and sort of trying to lay there and keep in sleep mode and really construct this idea of what was going to happen when these little kids went in this funeral home. And so when I woke all the way up, got myself going for the day, I sat down and started writing the short story called The Twins, and I wanted it to be really short. It's like 1,250 words, and I was able to finish it that day. So that's a case where I had a dream the night before, wrote an entire story, and finished it the next day. A lot of times my dreams take. I wrote a story. Did you read my collection, Last Gig on Planet Earth?
Oh yeah, yeah.
The story of the two hands. started off as an idea and a dream of I was a child running through the woods, and I came upon a severed hand. And again, it was like this foreboding, something is wrong with this hand being here. It means something really bad. So I woke up and I started to develop the idea for that story, and it took me a couple months, but that's what I got out of it. The story of the two hands is what came out of that dream. So a lot of times my dreams, I can't even tell you how many, lots of my short fiction ends up becoming, started with dreams. A lot of my dreams end up becoming the subject of my short fiction. So no more next question.
Nope, that's it. That's all the questions we have for you today.
This is a long episode, aren't we? We're
wow.
At 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
You have anything to add, or are we done?
I think we're pretty much done.
Go buy Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks on Amazon today. Where can they find that? Do you have a website they can... you have a blog, right?
Yeah, I have a blog, talesofUnspeakableTaste.blogspot.com. You can go also to talesofquestionabletaste.com, and of course strangehousebooks.com. It is on Amazon. You can just look it up there. Poor Bastards and Rich Fucks.
All right. Well, I appreciate you co-hosting the show, John. You're always a great guest. We've had you on. Is this your third or fourth appearance?
I think it might be my fourth. Although I think this is my second, where I'm the only other guy.
Well, I always love having you. You're a great friend, a great person to talk to. I recently came up to Chicago. We had dinner together and put a lot of shit in motion. Let's go ahead and talk about that for a second. If you can you publicly talk about the imprint that you've recently started to run, or do you want to wait on that?
We might want to wait on that. Yeah, there better be an official announcement before I actually start talking about it. But just keep paying attention. We're going to be announcing some great stuff pretty soon.
All right, John. Again, thanks a lot for handling the questions and shit for me. I hope everybody had a great experience this time. Sorry it went so long. I get hopped up on the go juice and I just fucking ramble. Go buy John's book. We'll see you all later. We're going to go strange the world a little bit, right, John?
Absolutely. We are definitely going to strange the world.
We're going to strange the world.
We're going to strange the world.
We're going to strange the fucking shit out of this world.
We're going to strange the world.
If the world was a vagina, would you, if we were going to tag team the Earth, the world, would you be an ass guy or a vagina guy?
Whew. I do like that vagina. I'm not a big fan of the butthole.
I am, so we would work very well together in a threesome with the world.
Nice. Perfect.
We'll see you later, gang. Till next time.